You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Arsenal Pass, episode 167. This week, we have a bit of a mailbag for you. We'll be fielding questions from the Arsenal Pass Discord, Twitter, and, of course, handwritten notes. But before that, we're going to talk about U.S. Nationals. We're recording this on a Friday, so day one of U.S. Nationals has just concluded. So we have the day one metagame breakdown as well as the draft breakdown. We're talking about that, talking about the meta, what we think of people's picks, and how ultimately we think it will go on day two. But anyway, Hayden, you are preparing for Australian Nationals, of course. How do you feel after seeing the day one metagame breakdown of US Nats?
So I think the metagame's we were talking about this last week. There's been a little bit of evolution through the first couple of weeks. This is effectively week 3 of this part of the Misspell meta. But it's pretty similar to what I expected. I think if we take a look, do you want to give us the breakdown? I can kind of tell you how that lined up against what I was thinking.
Yeah, so I'll go from top to bottom here. We have Zen. Oh, by the way, it's going to be 474 players here. We have Zen at 69.
Big Nationals.
Azalea at 58. KO at 58. New at 57. Enigma at 55. Kano at 26.
Number
Prism,
6, right?
Yep, number 6. We have Prism at 25, Levi at 22, Riptide 16, and I will stop at Riptide because and the reason I went down all the way to Riptide is because you said we have 2 undefeated Riptides after day 1, I believe.
Yeah, we do. Victor also 16. So I kind of see this as, if you look at this, I think the easiest way to break it down is Zen is, it's out the front in terms of playability, in terms of, representation. But then the next 4 decks have really close representation, right? 58, 58, 57, 55. So basically the same amount of people playing those decks in Azalea, KO, Nu, Enigma, which makes sense. And then you really step down again where you get to KO, Prism, Levi, I would say. And then the kind of last of the well-represented heroes is, interestingly, Riptide, which we'll talk about, Victor, and then kind of Dorinthia. And then you've got a lot of 5, 6s, etc. One person on Olympia, one person on Tiklavos, and one person on Arachne, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Olympia's interesting. I've heard Olympia just kind of sucks. I've heard it's basically like the other Warriors, but just bad. Have you played that deck at all? Yeah, I've heard it's just
I've seen it being played. Yeah, not particularly impressive. And then I think when you look at, I guess, what we were sort of thinking Nationals would shape out like all this national season, definitely Zen being number 1 was, I think, kind of where it landed at that point. Zen's the best, perceived best deck in the format for sure. I think KO and Enigma being in that top 5 makes a lot of sense. I think Azalea is maybe the surprising one to me. I kind of had that maybe 5th or 4th as opposed to 2nd, but they're all around the same representation, right? So it's just more represented than I probably expected Azalea to be. And honestly, that's just because I don't think it has particularly great matchups against a lot of these top 5 decks. And then Nu was definitely on the rise over the past since release, really. And I think that hero's only gained traction. I honestly can't tell you why that is. I actually think Nu is kind of only okay. But, being close to equal second played deck at US Nationals is really interesting. And then I'm not surprised to see that next tier, Kano and Prism. I definitely had that on the bingo list. A bit more Leviathan, I thought. About the Victor, I thought definitely more Riptide than I thought. But Riptide's actually...
Yeah, what
decent.
Is the Riptide pick? Was that floating around your testing group, or do you think that this Riptide number is actually represented by a singular testing group that sort of has this as a breakout deck?
No, I think this is probably a couple of people who... there's a Riptide person who's been posting about some stuff on YouTube, and I think it's probably them and probably a few others, and there might be a core group of maybe 4 or 5 people that decided to pick up Riptide. And I think it's actually pretty reasonable because I think Riptide has a good Zen matchup and a reasonable KO matchup, and I have to assume that your new matchup is also probably pretty reasonable. I don't know about your Illusionist matchup and your Azalea matchup, but Riptide is pretty decent. I assume these people are playing kind of like almost like a hybrid Riptide, which can be super aggressive, or you can actually look to present a bunch of on hits into something like Zen. But also you have access to the trap still to be able to block out big turns and shut down some aspects of big turns. So I think Riptide actually naturally pairs quite nicely into Zen, and I think that's why we saw, you want to talk about undefeated decks, but 2 Riptides undefeated after 4 rounds of Swiss of Class Constructed.
Mm-hmm. Just after the 4 rounds, so not after draft.
Yeah, so after so basically the structure of US Nationals is 4 rounds of CC, a draft, and then day 2 is, I believe, draft into CC at the end. it could be the other way around on day 2. Actually, I'm not 100% sure, but it's effectively 8 rounds of CC, 6 rounds of draft, cuts top 8. After the 4 rounds of Class Constructed, we have 7 Zen undefeated, 5 new. So that kind of, about the representation. 4 Azalea. Enigma and KO a little bit underperforming with only 3 each. Riptide 2, Prism 2, Kano 2. There's an undefeated Dash IO in the hands of, I believe that's Mara Faris. Undefeated Max and an undefeated Bolton. So yeah, quite a spread of 4-0 heroes. What's that? 1, 2, 3, like 9 heroes represented in the 4-0s heading into draft.
Nice, pretty nice. So if you were able, looking at this metagame breakdown, if you could rewind time and you happened to be a citizen of the United States and you had full knowledge that this was going to be the meta, what deck would you bring?
Well, I think this is basically pretty similar to the meta I would have expected. So
still bringing Dash?
What's that?
Still bringing Dash? That was your pick.
Right, that was the end of last weekend, right? What am I bringing? I'm calling Dash right now. I do still like Dash. I think Dash has a good Zen matchup, has a good KO matchup. I think it has a good Enigma matchup. I actually don't know about the new matchup. I haven't tested that very much yet. And the Azalea matchup is honestly abysmal. And it has a good Kano matchup. So I think Dash would actually be a pretty reasonable choice. But I think, I don't know. We'll see tomorrow, right? We'll see what rises to the top into top 8. I actually think Kano is a pretty reasonable pick. And I think Prism's also a pretty reasonable pick. I struggle with playing Zen. I just don't want to play Mirrors, honestly. That's the reason I don't want to play Zen. The deck is supremely powerful. It's insane, but I don't want to play Mirrors.
Interesting. So my question though, what deck would you bring? You have full knowledge. You know exactly what's going to show up.
Let me get away with it. Let me get away with not commit. I don't know. I mean, at this point in time, in my testing, it probably would have been Dash or Prism that I'd be bringing to the table, I think.
Okay.
For this expected minute. But the minigame's going to shift after this. We've got a one Michael Hamilton at XO after day 1 on Enigma. I'm sure he's going to pioneer something in Enigma that people are going to latch onto. Maybe we see Enigma rise. Maybe we see some other heroes fall off. Maybe, something like KO has a really bad weekend and KO drops right off the boil in terms of being a top 5 play deck as we head into the next 2 weeks of Nationals. Like, there's still time for people to adapt and change their decks. And I think people are looking to US Nationals. I mean, I am. And so many people are looking to US Nationals to indicate the meta, but also what is happening within matchups. Like, the data that comes out of US Nationals is going to be really important. And actually, the great thing now is because if you go to the Fab TCG website, you can see round by round matchups. People can easily run this data with a script. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get data from this US Nationals, which is cool.
We'll get some pivot table showing matchup spreads and win rates and things like that. I want to talk a little bit about this draft breakdown. It's not very exciting, but it is relevant, right? So for the day 1 draft breakdown, we have a split of 146 Zens, 144 Enigmas, and 135 News. That's a pretty good split. I mean, that, we're talking about draft, so ideally we're kind of facilitating a reasonably balanced metagame in an 8-man pod. Nevertheless, I think that sometimes you can see a skew towards like one deck being a little bit above the rest, despite, the set literally being designed to be kind of split like this. This is a very, very healthy draft split.
It's definitely a bit more healthy than I thought. Because I think in testing and from what I've seen from pod breakdowns and what people have kind of been pursuing, I think Zen has been a little bit overdrafted. So maybe I expected to see... So if you look at this breakdown, it's like, 34% Zen, 32% Enigma, whatever. Or sorry, 35% Zen, 34% Enigma, and then like 31% new. Round up on those. I just realized I got to 98, right? 97. But I think in what I've been hearing, Zen's been more around the kind of like 36, 37% probably mark, a little bit maybe overdrafted, maybe even higher, closer to 40. Enigma's probably been a little bit underdrafted. And in some cases, we've been seeing New be the second most represented deck. I think this feels right for Enigma and Zen to a degree. I might have just expected more Zen. New, I struggle with. I think it's my view in testing so far is that it's been hard to have a pot of 3 News. So I'd expect New to be about this or even actually lower on representation, more closer to maybe like 28%. But yeah, it's because I would expect a lot of pods to have 25% New effectively. So this is obviously significantly above kind of.
I would love to see maybe they can do it as well. I mean, I'm assuming if you can see matchup to matchup, I'd love to see the win rate spread on this as well. But you need additional context. And
data.
I
find it so much less interesting and limited because it comes down to the amount of heroes, and it comes into pod. I don't mind seeing it pod by pod.
Well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you need pod data as well. That would be really cool. But overall, it looks like a very healthy draft format, which is cool to see.
Dude, this draft format is cool. This draft format is really cool. It has a lot of replayability. It's really interesting. There's a lot of different ways you can tackle matchups, and it's dependent on cards you seek around the pod, cards you pass, cards you pick up. You can draft sideboard cards because it's 30 card maximum deck. Like this is, I just think this is the best. We had Matt Rogers on 2 weeks ago, right? And Matt said he thinks this is the best draft format so far, probably. And I agree. I think this is the best draft format so far as I've drafted more and more of it. So,
do you think that 30 card maximum is the future of Flesh and Blood?
I don't know. I think it's an interesting principle they can roll out. It might depend on the format, right? In terms of, the heroes, the spread, do they want some way fatigue by damage to be relevant to the format? I think it might depend, honestly.
Awesome.
I could see it being the standard though, for sure.
Yeah, I think it will be the standard. It's also just like, I feel like the plus 30 card deck, or sort of, I don't know, what would you call it? Gameplay.
Boring.
Not only was it boring, but it's also just terrible for a new player. Like, you just come to Flesh and Blood, and it's like, hey, here's this like super high level concept, and it's like very, very important. And you're like, why? I just want to play the game.
It's so nuanced as well.
Yeah, it's
so nuanced.
It's not great. And then the funny thing is, like, once you get to the other side of the bell curve, it's also not super fun to engage with, even on the high end, in my opinion. Like, it has its merits. I think it was, there was some skill flexibility there, but ultimately, I looked at it as a sort of defect of the Flesh and Blood draft design, and I'm happy that we've maybe found a way to sort of subvert that at this point. Anything else you want to mention in the news before you hop onto that mailbag?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about US Nationals. If you're, I was kind of watching some players and what they were playing just out of interest. So looking at 4-0 players, Roger Bodie on New. I know he posted on Twitter his deck list saying, "This is what I'm playing. Check it out." I was also looking at Pat Eshke on Zen, Michael Hamilton on Enigma, as we talked about. Andrew Lorenz was rolling out on Azalea. Peter, your boy Peter at 4-0. I think he had a good day one. I think he finished X1 maybe.
He did.
Yeah, on day one. So we already talked about Mara playing Dash.io, which is definitely interesting. Charles Dunn on Zen is interesting. Is that a fatigue Zen? I don't know.
That's the real indicator that Zen is a broken deck, is that Charles Dunn is playing an aggro deck.
Yeah. Shout out to Evan as well, who was part of our testing group for PT Amsterdam at 4-0 on Zen as well. And then Brian Lorenz on Enigma as well.
Nice. Yeah, good luck to that. By the time you listen to this, US Nationals will be over and we'll have crowned a new US National champion. But good luck to those players in day 2.
Who's your pick?
I mean, are we putting money on it, or are you just asking me? Like, it would actually change.
You can pretend there's money on it.
Okay, I'm picking Michael Hamilton.
Okay, there's no money on it. Who are you picking?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. He's just a safe pick at this point. He's definitely the safest pick. If you ask me as a buddy, I'd say Peter Budensack, because man, that guy picked Kano when it was asked so many times that he deserves.
And now it's actually good.
Yeah, he deserves to maybe get his lick. Also, if he wins US Nationals, I don't think we're going to hear a bad beat story out of him, and that would be a first. That man loves his bad beat stories. Loves them.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
I was just looking at who finished it, so there's 3 7-0s. Michael Hamilton, Austin Summers, definitely I'll be watching out for Austin tomorrow. He's playing Prism. Obviously, by the time this drops, you already know who's done well. But then Andrew Lorenz, as I was talking about before, on Azalea at 6-1 as well. Alexander Vor's at 6-1 as well. I don't know what he's playing. I would assume Kano. I'm going to assume.
Yeah, hopefully not Reinar. Alexander Vor, wait, is that the, sorry, Matthew Vor is the brother, Alexander Vor is the Kano player. Okay, sometimes I get it mixed up.
And sometimes Reinar player.
Yeah, sometimes Reinar player. Some of you were able to tune in last week to that beautiful story of how he basically punted the World Championship.
Caleb at 6-1 as well. I assume also playing Kano. So,
surely playing Kano. I think Caleb's locked in at this point. I think he's a true Kano player. That's sick. That's great that the Kano boys are doing well. I mean, you have Alexander Vor, Majin Bay, and Peter Budensack sitting high up in the Swiss rankings after day 1. Kano might take down the US Nats.
I'm pulling for my boy Evan Herndon. He's 6-1, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see who's right at the end of this. I mean, not that anyone's right, but Anyway, what are we doing? Where are we going?
We are hopping into the mailbag. Like I said, we field these questions off of both Twitter and our Discord. But if you want to get your question read out on next week's podcast for the Command and Cookout, you should just a comment on YouTube. First one is from Crooney. They say, what's a single design element you appreciate about Part the Misfail? What's a single design element you don't appreciate about Part the Misfail?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Let's talk a design element that I appreciate about the set. And I think it's going to be probably the use of Ward, I think. I was worried about Ward a little bit, I think, because obviously we've had so many issues with Prism, with Spectra, even with Phantasm to a degree. And Ward is quite an interesting design principle, I think. And it could be I think it's really hard to balance as well, because we've gone from a time where Ward's felt pretty terrible, right? Like Ward's felt pretty bad, like the effects, you can't hold effects around long enough. You lose these effects really quickly. But I think with the set, just across all the auras, even the equipment, I think the equipment's really interesting as well. So I'd say the use of the implementation of Ward in the set is probably, to me, the most interesting part of this, and that's limited and constructed, honestly. It seems like so far, I mean, maybe Michael Hamilton's going to break the mold, but in CET, it doesn't seem like Enigma is too powerful. It seems like, particularly the Zen matchup is really tough, but also there's a lot of ways to target that deck, because high damage output is really tough, because Ward actually, it's hard to get value out of your Ward if these auras don't stick around, right? So,
I'll give my favorite, so then you can talk about the bad side. I'm going to go just high level. I like that the heroes are cool. Like that sounds dumb, but it's real. Like I think that we went through a few sets where the heroes are pretty bland. And it's hard to judge that in an unbiased way, because there was minimal impact on class constructed outside of heavy hitters, and of course KO. I guess Victor to an extent as well. But I felt like we were getting heavy hitters for me was a big dud. I wasn't a huge fan of the draft format, but also this like vanilla gameplay really wasn't doing it for me. And I was wondering if we were going to continue that pathway as a way to try to bring new players to the game, try to make the game a bit more approachable, especially after what in my opinion was a bit of a failure in the form of Bright Lights. I thought they might, opt to play it safe and continue with the heavy hitters type of design. But you look at Part the Misfail, and it just kind of oozes character, right? And that's what I like. I think it was a little bit, more tailored towards like opening in a new market than I would have liked. But I do think that ultimately at the end product just like oozes character, oozes flavor, and every hero kind of gets me excited. Zen less so than the others, but particularly New and Enigma. Like they just get me excited. That's what I like about Flesh and Blood is the gameplay patterns and elements that it has that are very distinctive to Flesh and Blood. And sort of like KO and Victor, well, I can enjoy those decks at times. They don't really do that for me. Or when I play something like an Illusionist or New, where I'm like stealing my opponent's cards and like, having flash and things, they got stealth. Like, it's just cool. I love that. And I don't feel like I can get that experience anywhere else. And ultimately, I think for me, Flesh and Blood should be doubling down on some of those things. They should really take advantage of their strengths and the things that differentiate them from other games.
Yeah, I want to give a special shout out to Chi and Blue Matters in this set. I think the instance being instance and that flip into Chi, transcendence to Chi, I think is actually really, really well done. And that might have, had I thought about it longer, that might have been my actual call out, but I do really like the use of Ward. I think those two particularly are really interesting to me. And I like that they limited how many cards actually transcend. I was worried when I first saw the set. I was like, this doesn't feel like transcend's going to be that important. It's super important. It's powerful, but it's balanced in a really nice way, I think. No block cards, instants, etc. So, yeah. I'm going to be a little bit contrary to what you just said a little bit. And I think this might be maybe a little bit... I might get some flack for this because people might see this completely the opposite way. I just praised Ward and I'm about to talk shit about stealth, and I feel people might see that as the opposite way around depending on what your preferences are. But I actually find the implementation of stealth in this format to be a little bit lackluster, honestly. I feel like the use of stealth as a keyword that has no other direct abilities other than what's tied to the keyword stealth with other effects. I think that was interesting to a degree. I really don't like Assassin. I think Assassin is kind of a an uninteresting class, honestly, personally. I think it's so hard to balance as well, because I think it's either bad and uninteresting or uninteresting and too good, honestly, because of the on-hit effects and the playing against it. It can be so frustrating. But I just think the way they've used stealth here is probably my least exciting design element of Part of the Misfell. I don't find it particularly innovative or fun or interesting. Not honestly, like that's really harsh words, I guess. I think they've done a good enough job. Like, the set overall is amazing. Honestly, that's how I feel. But if I had to pick something out, it's stealth. And not to say that stealth is terrible and they've done it badly, but I just think it's probably the most uninteresting, uninspired kind of part of the design of the set, honestly.
Okay.
A bit harsh, Brendan? I don't know.
No. I don't think it's a bit harsh. For me, my least favorite design element, honestly, I don't know if I have an answer. It doesn't mean there's nothing wrong with the set. I can't point to a singular thing that I really don't like about the set. I think if you gave me some more time with it, maybe I could come up with something. But I mean, this set had a lot of things I've been asking for a long time, which is, make the interesting classes, cap the fucking draft cards because that shit was terrible. And yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I've got another one for you. The use of 5 expansion slots for random mechanologist cards. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, there was some things with Part to Misfail that I think are ultimately really good choices for the company and really good choices for the game long term. That I, as a player that started at the beginning, am not a huge fan of. That being said, I think that is like a super biased and even jaded opinion, so I don't give a lot of validity to it. Like, I don't think it's a very valid opinion, but there are parts of me that I have this like affinity for the early days of the game when we weren't kind of having these like I don't know, like all these like lottery cards to hit and this golden pack, and I don't know if those things are necessarily bad. They're just very different from the Flesh and Blood that I fell in love with, which is not a problem, but there's going to be a little bit of friction. So if I had to point to something, maybe that would be it. But once again, I don't put a lot of validity on that because I think it's nostalgic and rose tinted glasses-esque. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Cool, great question.
Next one's from Skoggy. Next, what class do you hope enters the game soon? I can go first.
You go back to my. Yeah, you go. I need to go back to my book and have a look at the classes.
Yeah, for me, it's Alchemist. So Alchemist would utilize a lot of potions, which, let's be real, if they just was like, okay, class use a lot of potions, that's dog shit. But the reason why it's cool is because if they made a class that was playable that used a lot of potions, it had to be a pretty funky class, right? Like, it had to be doing some wild stuff because potions by themselves are pretty bad. So, I don't know. I've been looking forward to Alchemist basically since the beginning because I think it actually is in the lore book.
There's a few in the lore book. There's also things like Bard, etc. as well, right?
But Bard has been printed, so.
True. Necromancer, is that also in the lore book?
I could check, but it's a little bit far away. It's back there.
I'm pretty sure.
Maybe it is. Necromancer would be cool as well. I'm assuming Necromancer would be a nice follow-up to Dramai hitting Living Legend, so you could like reanimate basically allies that you mill into your graveyard as you reanimate them as allies, and then now you have this sort of Dramai as kind of game plan, but you're doing it via interacting with your graveyard, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think probably for me, it honestly might be Necromancer. I think that might be the most interesting. So I was thinking about Alchemist, right? When you said that, and I was like, oh, maybe it is Alchemist. Maybe that's something I'd be interested in. But I just don't know if the potions. I have to be really. I think the hero mechanic itself would actually be very interesting because I don't think the potions outside of 2 or 3 of the main potions are actually that interesting.
Yeah, that's my thesis though. Sure. It's like it would have to be so unique and so different to the core game loop because potions are so bad that maybe it'd be cool. I'm assuming the class is balanced and it's playable.
I wouldn't mind also seeing like a riff off of current classes, right? Like maybe they go to this almost like subclass, like Samurai, for instance. Do they go to a kind of an adjacent kind of class?
Interesting.
I don't know.
I think Druid could be cool as well. So you're like your character is morphing into other classes and you have this like base. So in my vision, what a Druid would do is you would start with this base hero and this base hero ability. Probably the base hero ability would be just to shift into different things, but you would have this almost sideboard-esque inventory slot of different characters that you could pay specific cost to morph into, and you could go from one to the other.
We've already got demi heroes.
Yeah,
so.
and ideally it would be balanced enough that you can make that decision multiple times in a game, rather than just being, okay, in the new matchup I just transform into a bear, or in the Zen matchup I just transform into a hawk or something. Ideally it would be something along the lines of like, as my game plan progresses, or based off how my cards come off the top and stuff like that, I can dynamically shift into these characters by jumping through some kind of hoops that are not too egregious but also interesting to do. I think that could be very flavorful.
What about talent wise? What about would you like to see any existing classes paired with existing talents?
That's with existing talents for sure.
Or new talents.
No, new talent's a tough one, right? Because you're like, what can
you
cost you a
speculate
talent?
on that.
Yeah, I want like the sorry, the most ridiculous thing just came to my mind. Because a talent could be anything, right? Okay, let's go with current talents. Because
I'm sick of illusionists getting all the love. Like
same. Clearly for me, it's going to be wizard, but I would love to see a shadow wizard.
Oh, yeah,
that'd be sick.
That would be.
Because like chain, like I don't know. I guess Vincent, not quite there, not quite doing it for me. But if I think about chain and then I combine that with Kano, I'm like, oh, that could be really nice. But honestly, I'm not gonna lie. When I first fell in love with Kano, you know what? I was like, damn, dude, Ice Wizard would be sick, and it was sick. It was awesome. What about you?
I think it's Draconic Runeblade.
Draconic Runeblade. I feel like that would just be Fi-esque, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it'd be more interesting than that, honestly. But yeah, because you still have the elements of what I like about some of the elements of Emperor is like the red kind of matters, but being arcane damage based makes it quite interesting. I think a Runeblade could be like that as well. So.
Yeah, I guess I would see that
and-
as like an aggro deck most likely, and hopefully we could avoid just like it's not that I don't like aggro decks.
I
it's
like aggro sometimes.
You say you like aggro, like I'm not playing Zen because I don't want to play mirrors because aggro mirrors are terrible.
Yeah. But okay, so there's definitely been aggro mirrors in the past that I've enjoyed, like chain mirrors, for instance. I would say that there's complexity to that. Briar mirrors I enjoyed as well, and that was a straight out aggro.
Okay, Briar mirrors, yes. Chain mirrors. Yeah. I genuinely don't think you're remembering it the way it was. Dude, that shit was like,
I like
homie got his Artivore, homie got his Soul Reaping. It was so bullshit. Chain mirrors, I hated chain mirrors.
I like chain mirrors. I would have maybe banned the specialization. What's it called?
Yeah, Soul Reaping. It sucked.
Yeah. But the rest is fine.
Dude, the Artivore stuff was pretty annoying too. I'm not gonna lie, because the first Artivore you play just increases the likelihood that you get to the next Artivore because you see more cards. And it was very swingy. I actually really disliked the chain. I played an egregious amount of chain mirrors, and
you played Elixir mirror, dude.
Yeah, I'm sure those are again aggro.
I just feel like a lot of aggro mirrors in this game don't feel very enjoyable. Like so, Briar post errata mirrors I felt were awful.
Yeah, Briar pre-errata mirrors were great, but maybe that's just because we were beating everybody. Like maybe it's because
maybe, but I still think there's a lot of just because you had more impacts on the defensive end and the offensive end, it made more decisions. Whereas after the errata, it was just like, well, purely offensive is better. So
yeah, it was like more of a mid-range deck, right? It was not.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But when you could block with a single card for 6, it was pretty good.
It was pretty good.
All right,
interesting. I think like I had a follow-up question to this. What class do you hope enters the game?
What class do you hope doesn't enter?
Yeah, that's what is your favorite class in Flesh and Blood?
I honestly don't have one now. I think.
But if you had to pick.
If I had to pick one. I think just design-wise and the enjoyment of like brewing with the cards and fun I've had with them, it's probably Runeblade, honestly.
Yeah, Runeblade's definitely a good one. Viscerai, Chain were great, but
yeah.
I don't see you jumping out of your seat for Vincent. Briar was cool.
Briar, though. 3 out of 4 ain't bad.
Yeah, 3 out of 4. For me, I mean, obviously, it's Wizard. I love Wizard. I loved Icelander. I love Kano. And yeah, they've just kind of hit with the Wizards for me. Icelander at Worlds was kind of not that cool. Not going to lie. Once they neutered that deck, it was
Which Worlds?
Worlds Barcelona.
Oh yeah, sure,
of course, Worlds Barcelona. Yeah, I didn't love that version of Icelander, but it was still okay. I think the Wizards have just been massive hits.
Yeah.
Anyway. On the next one.
My last shout out is I would like to see Merchant maybe used at some point as well. Obviously, we've seen a hero printed with that, but I'll cav down.
Yeah, I honestly had a lot of I had high hopes for Bard as well, but I haven't played UPF, and when I first saw the Bard as the promo, it didn't look super interesting to me. But I had high hopes for that class. That'd be really cool. I was like, how are you going to institute music into this thing? And yeah, I mean, it's just it's effectively not playable for me because it's not playable in a 1v1 format. So maybe it's playable in Blitz, but yeah, my point holds. All right. Next one's from Crooney. They say coffee or tea.
Oh, I don't drink coffee, so tea.
Do you drink tea though? Do you drink it like daily?
Yeah. Not daily, like once, twice a week, maybe.
Okay, that doesn't really count. This is like, what is your source of caffeine? Is kind of the question.
Neither.
Just fucking raw dogging life over there. No caffeine.
People always say that, like if I'm on a work
Do
trip
they
or something,
really?
and people,
I'm not the first person who said that.
People get annoyed at me. Yeah, like they'll be like, "That's ridiculous." That we'll get up or whatever, meet for breakfast, and then people are like, "Oh, okay, before we head to this like appointment or whatever, I need a coffee." Like, do you need a coffee? I'm like, I don't actually drink coffee, and they're just like, "What gets you going in the morning?" I'm like, a shower,
sunlight,
breakfast. Yeah, sunlight and a shower is what actually wakes me up in the mornings. I have to have a shower in the mornings. I can't not have a shower in the mornings.
Really? You can't?
So I can like work out first, but then I have to have a shower before I like kind of start my day mentally.
Damn,
I don't know.
I got weeks without a shower.
Yeah, I can smell you from here, man. I think that's I think it's a mental thing though. Yeah, try freaking rooming with this guy, man. Whoa.
Whoa. I drink coffee, but yeah, I think I told this on the pod. I got this new pre-work. So, okay, I'm just going to go a little bit deeper on this. I have drunk coffee for a while, but honestly, the biggest hack I've incorporated into my life for energy levels was waiting at least 1 hour before drinking my coffee in the morning. So like letting those sleep chemicals, which is called adenosine, clear out of your body before you slam caffeine, which basically just suppresses that chemical. Again, I try to get sunlight before I do that, and it's been a huge difference. But nowadays, I work out. After that hour, I'll go to the gym. And I got this new pre-workout in Texas. You know, I went to some back alley place. I was telling you, it's called Bucked Up. It's got a picture of a deer on there. It's got a bunch of FDA regulated chemicals, and whew, man, I get bucked up in the morning, and
I'm ready to get bucked up.
I'm good to go. See, I remember I was like texting my girlfriend. I was like driving to the gym, and like in the morning, I was like, I'm bucked up.
Just sending voice clips. Whoa!
Yeah.
Like he's Ric Flair out here.
So that was pretty well for me. And then maybe I'll have like one coffee after that and try not to drink coffee after like 1 or 2 p.m. But definitely a coffee person. Next one.
I'm a fan of the Coke no sugars or Coke Zero, depending on what part of the world you're in.
Really thought you were talking about something else there. We were talking about caffeine. And
quickly said no sugar.
Like how do you get going in the morning? He's like, I don't drink coffee, I don't drink tea, I really love Coke. Zero. Anyway, Casey Ross or Raw. I asked Brendan, that's me, briefly on Twitter, but I'd like to get in it. Would Fab Draft improve if heroes were allowed to splash in limited? This could be represented as a maximum of 10 cards from one. Of tech cards, hybrid cards, and hitters helped a lot, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect hybrid designs to be in every single set forever. What do you think about splashing in Flesh and Blood?
I mean, it just comes down to design elements, I think, right? I think that is what hybrid cards are to a degree. I think that's what having a talent that's tied to a core mechanic of the set is. So, for instance, Mystic in this, right, is interesting. Because I think if you look at Part the Misfail, right, and you look at kind of the idea of, it's putting it into the kind of, I guess, the context of the set. So I look at something like Mystic cards in the set, and there's Mystic cards that are designed for each of the heroes. There's Mystic cards that work in a wedge of each of the 2 heroes quite well, but they're all playable. They're all splashable to an extent, right? And I think that's kind of what splashability or crossover of class mechanics is to a degree. And I think there's an example of this, right? If you look at the Chi cards specifically, some of those pair really, really well into specifically those heroes, right? So something like a drop in the ocean, right? The -1 is really strong in Enigma, for instance, because you want to play at instant speed. Whereas, on the flip side, that can be quite awkward in Ninja or Assassin, for instance. Same reverse of the Gogan card to an extent. I think that card does really well in new often, but can be a little bit, tougher in others. But you can still splash those into those other heroes, right? You can still play them. They're just going to be less effective. And it's the same with the rest of the Mystic cards as well. Wide Blue Yonder, that potentially in new and Zen, great in that wedge. Big Blue Sky, on the other hand, probably not something you want to play in that. So, yeah, and the same with like the 0, 1, 2, 3 cost cards. I think those pair particularly one certain heroes, and then well into archetypes of heroes as well, but then in others they don't. But you can still play all of them. So I think there's that, and then you've got hybrid cards as well. I do think they could do even more potentially. I don't know if it's like splashing of a different class and you can play certain amount of it. I think it's too complicated and too difficult, because then you have to design, because you're right now constrained by the class design, right? So it makes it a bit easier to keep, interactions limited. As soon as you open up the card pool to every single class, including the implication of what their hero ability does with those cards, I just think it's too complicated for testing, for playing. It doesn't work. But I think they could introduce a third, rather than just talent and hybrid. They could introduce something as a third kind of aspect that allows you to kind of almost have that splash ability. It's kind of where my head's at. I thought about this one actually quite a bit, to be honest.
So I have very differing opinions and very strong opinions on this. So you mentioned hybrid cards. I think that hybrid cards and splashing, very different thing. So splashing assumes that you can take any card and add it to your deck, right? We could say 10 of anything. The problem with that and why it's different from hybrid cards are designed to be flexible, right? There is a design price that you are paying with the hybrid card, and there's a balance there because they're different from singular class cards. The problem with splashing is you open up everybody to wanting the same exact card. You want the best card in the pack. Everybody is effectively going for the same strategy if there's a card that exists above the rest, and no singular card in any card game, unless it has the same text, is truly replacement value. They can be very close, but they're never truly replacement value. The idea of replacement value level cards is mostly due to smaller sample sizes. And my theory is that every card has an absolute value, especially when extrapolated to an infinite sample size and an infinite metagame that you could expect, right? So because of that, everybody picks the same card. The reason why this is so fresh on my mind is because this is what Lorcana does. Lorcana has colors like Magic, and no lands. And you can draft any color. The problem with that is everybody wants the exact same card. And you're like, oh, no color limitations, no hero limitations, so many decisions. Actually, 0 decisions. You just pick the best card every single time. Restrictions actually facilitate players to make relevant decisions. And when you have no restrictions, players make no decisions because there is only an objectively correct card to pick at that point. There's objectively better strategy. So sorry, when
I say decisions, I more mean around design decisions. They have to then factor everything in. But yeah.
So I'm super against it for that point. I think that hybrid cards, that's like a version of splashing, but it's like way different because hybrid cards are intentionally designed to be hybrid. Where if you could, let's say you could add one card of any class, right? Every player would open that first pack and be like, okay, what is just the best card, right? Doesn't impact my strategy. Or if it was something more egregious like 10, because then you would wheel the pack, effectively every single player in that draft pod would be playing, at least in the early picks, the same strategy and picking the same cards under the same thesis. And they would effectively, given a perfect amount of knowledge, actually make 0 decisions rather than something relevant like, ooh, am I going to send the signal here? Am I like all of that goes out the window? It's a good question though. Like it's a really good question.
Yeah, I think when you talked about the difference between splashing and flexibility, yes, that's true. But I think what my point is that the concept of splashing it comes specifically from Magic. So if you take a step back and you think about splashing more as a concept of an idea around how you play cards that go into multiple decks, that's flexibility, right? Like that's what Magic offers you. You can be a monocolor. Some sets is like the design principles are built around tricolors, dual color, sometimes monocolor. Thinking back to some of the old core sets when it came to limited, and that's a very similar concept to Flesh and Blood in a way. But what happens when you talk about splashing is it's very similar to flexibility in Flesh and Blood, whether it's hybrid cards, whether that's a talent that's universal across multiple heroes.
Flesh and Blood has no land system, which you're adding in post deck building. It's a land,
so it has to look different.
Exactly, because the land system is the cost that you will pay no matter what. Because technically, when you draft Magic, you can draft any card in your deck, any color, anything. It's just can you play it? And Flesh and Blood, the resources are built into the card. Same thing with Lorcana, and that's where the splashing kind of breaks, in my opinion. So,
Dude, I keep hearing or seeing things about Lorcana and then scratching my head and being like, wait, why do people play this game again?
Well, nobody plays limited. It's not a real format. It's not a supported format or anything. So even the pack collation is not set up to support drafts. So
support it.
Yeah. So it's not like a format, but if you go to a tournament, sure, there'll be some side events. And if you want super free tendies, by the way, sure. Nobody knows how to draft. People pick unplayable cards and you just pick cards that cantrip and you pick a curve and you basically auto win. That will change soon once the information gets out. But it's not a format. Thank God.
It's disappointing.
No dual format. No, I mean, I like limited. And I know people on that listen to the podcast don't believe that. I like limited, but fuck me, do not give me dual format Pro Tours in Lorcana unless they drastically fix the draft format. I was playing some Magic Modern Horizons 3 and I was actually I was really
it's all right.
Yeah, it's all right. I really enjoy the draft process of Magic. I think it's really good. I think you make a lot of decisions. Then you have to play the game.
Yeah, wow, exactly. I think part of the must fail is a big percentage of the way to a decent Magic draft experience, which is great, and the gameplay is infinitely better. So
yeah,
I think they've done well with the set, honestly.
Yeah, sometimes Magic gameplay is okay, but sometimes I was playing online, and I mean, I don't know, I was losing so much that I actually had card game psychology copium hit in where I'm sitting in my computer, at my computer playing Arena and I'm just this is fucking bullshit. Obviously that's not true because if I'm losing more than everybody else, it's not because it's a BS scenario, it's because I'm bad. I was this is ridiculous. Every time they have it, I don't have it. They got the freaking bomb. I don't have the bomb. I don't get the land. I'm God damn it. Yeah. I was getting so frustrated. Ultimately, I'm just kind of bad, but it is what it is. All right, let's go to the next one. Next one's from Vertov. They say, where is the best cheeseburger? Do you know this answer?
Do I know this definitively?
I
can give you my opinion.
I know the definitive.
Okay, go on.
Now you first.
Well, okay. Here's a little backstory.
Yeah, you gotta have a backstory if you're gonna call it the best burger in the world.
So, well, no, I'm gonna give you my opinion of what's the best cheeseburger I've had.
MacD's.
I didn't eat beef for almost 10 years. Mostly. I would once or twice a year. I would have beef, whether it was I went to someone's house and they cooked a steak or whatever, someone made a lunch or what, where it was the only food to eat or it was going to go to waste or something. I would eat it, right? I had a mince pie when I was back in New Zealand, something like that. But basically I wasn't eating beef for a very long time. And then recently I was you know what? I'm going to start eating beef again. And I was cheeseburgers. And I was ooh. I had a couple of good cheeseburgers. Cheeseburgers are actually really good. I didn't realize how good cheeseburgers were. I was always eating chicken burgers, or chicken sandwiches.
I do love me a chicken burger.
Right, and that's all I ate for a very long time, and then I stopped eating burgers. But cheeseburgers, man, it's just, especially if that meat's cooked so well. So when we were at Worlds in 2022 in San Jose, we went to this. Yeah, we
no went invite to the BPAT. Oh shit!
You were invited, but you were casting. We did a there was after day 2, so the same day as top 8. Basically, the top 16, so 9th to 16th place, played in this thing called the Dev Challenge, basically, against a bunch of devs. And there was 2, I think, people from side events that also got to play as well. They got an entry into it. And you played, I think most people played round 1 against a dev. I played against Jason Chung round 1. I was playing Viserai. I decided to play Viserai. I was playing Kano in the event, played Viserai into Leviah. It's pretty funny, actually. He was I'm so glad you played Viserai and not Leviah because I decided to play AB0. But I still beat him anyway, so that's fine. But basically, we played that, and then we were let's do a draft afterwards. The devs were keen to do a draft, so we're going to do a team draft, right? Devs against some people from New Zealand.
I'm pretty good at those.
Okay, I'm going to decline to comment. And we went for lunch first, and we went to this brewery, and they just did 3 things on their menu, right? They just did fries, a beef smash burger, and a veggie burger, I think, or something. And that beef smash burger was honestly insane. It was so good. And I'm not saying it's the best in the world. It's not the best cheeseburger, but the smash cheeseburger was really good, and then so good that I went back for dinner.
What is a smash burger? Because I hear that referred to a lot. Is it a kind of burger?
It's the patties smashed. But it has all the cheeseburger thing. It's got pickles, it's got cheese. It's a cheeseburger.
All right.
Yeah. Anyway. That was my story. I don't know. I've not had enough cheeseburgers basically, but I do like a cheeseburger.
For the longest time, I used to say that the best meal I ever had was in Greece. at this this burger place. I got this burger this one time, and it was like fire. I couldn't tell you anything about it. I barely have memory for it, but I just remember I was like, every time people would ask me after that for like a decade, I was like, oh, hands down, this place. I don't think I have the memory of it anymore.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, where is it?
Oh, it's in Mykonos. Before Mykonos, like Mykonos nowadays, is like this like expensive place you go to. It's like
it's really expensive.
Yeah, it was not like that when we went. It was, I mean, it wasn't not nice, but it was not. Oh, it's like Ibiza or whatever, which is kind of what it's like now. I feel like people just go there to party. Anyway, there was a burger place. It was fire. I had the best burger of my life. And yeah, I mean, since then, I always told people, they're like, where's your best meal ever? I was like, random place in Mykonos. It was just so good. So good.
Yeah.
But I can't really recall anything past that.
I wouldn't have thought Greece for a good cheeseburger.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You find things in the most interesting of places.
Yes. All right. But follow-up question, Fancy. If you could introduce a cheeseburger as a hero, what class and what condiments?
Wait, what? So wait, I have to choose what class the cheeseburger is.
Yeah,
and then I have
what
to choose
condiments. I don't know what the condiments are referring to. I mean, like, I don't know. Just run with it.
Sure. Like a cheeseburger is brute. Surely, I don't know. That's what I feel. Especially a smash burger.
Yeah, smash burger. That does make sense. If you could introduce a cheeseburger here, what class would it be? Man, are there any other viable classes? Right. Kind of is brute, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
And what condiments? Whatever that means.
It's always got to be ketchup and mustard for me.
Ketchup and mustard.
Yeah, both on a cheeseburger.
I
want both.
Right. You got that.
But I want like American mustard.
American mustard. You don't want Dijon?
No, I don't want Dijon mustard. I specifically don't want Dijon mustard.
Specifically don't want Dijon.
I would take like a light honey mustard. So what?
No Grey Poupon?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's a brand of Dijon.
Okay, well, we don't have that over here apparently. Well, we might. I don't know. All right, what else we got?
It's the last one. It's from Rob. If you could each host and could redesign a class, what would you choose and how would you change it?
Oh, if we could each redesign a class,
maybe you can make Assassin interesting.
You know what? I actually think that's exactly what I would do. I would redesign Assassin. I would do away with the stealth mechanic, and I would come up with specific mechanics to the heroes. And I would probably have. So we've had two. I mean, Arachne was just such a whiff. Like, I actually think that's the starting point that became. What my theory is this, right? Is that Assassin was too unfun in internal testing. That's actually what I think it was. Like, it was just too oppressive when it was good, and they had to pare back the on hits. And I think Contract is actually an interesting mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what they did with Arachne to start with was the right kind of idea. I think the reason they didn't run with that further is honestly, I think it just became a bit too oppressive in testing, and they went with the stealth mechanic, which I think just having stealth as a keyword just doesn't quite work. It's just not quite as interesting as I would like it to be. So I think I would look at keeping stealth. I probably would have done stealth specifically to Zuri and made that maybe look a little bit different than it does. I think the Azuri mechanic is actually kind of interesting, honestly, the specific mechanic for Azuri. I just don't love a lot of the cards. And then for something like Nu, I probably would have just done away with stealth mechanic and tried to lean more into the... Because I don't feel like it synergizes that well with Mystic, right? Like, the whole Nu thing is that, you get to activate the hero ability and at some point it does something. But other than that hero doesn't feel like it's Mystic at all, is kind of my problem. Whereas Zen and... Enigma do, especially Enigma, but I think Zen does as well. So yeah, I don't know.
I think that's a good pick. I think that's like one of the best picks out there. I also do like when I first saw. So funny, I'm forgetting the name. The first assassin.
Arachne.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which one's the real ass one? The one that, the other one that was like developed later. There's like, okay, so name all the assassins. Nu, Arachne.
Azuri.
Isn't there one?
And then there's Arachne Solitary Confinement, but that's a Blitz hero.
Yeah,
it's young hero only. Okay. It's limited, yeah.
All right, blanking then. Anyway, yeah, I really like the design from the top level. I loved Contract. I loved banishing cards off the top. I loved sort of getting this information. I thought that was super cool. And then obviously potentially playing your opponent's cards was just awesome to me. It just didn't really materialize as something that I enjoyed.
Yeah, it just hasn't played out that way, right?
Yeah. Just like the gameplay for me was just not fun. Ultimately, I lost my interest as soon as I actually saw the cards and saw the gameplay. But for me, I would redesign Bard for 1v1. I think that Bard's a class that could absolutely ooze flavor. Like, it is such a cool class idea. It's already such a weird role in fantasy, right? Like, you have this traveling group of people that's like going to take down this fucking dragon, and you got some dude just sings in the back. Like, what the fuck? What is
Have
that?
you seen Dungeons and Dragons, by the way, the movie?
No. Is it good?
Dude, it's good.
Have you seen Fallout?
It's funny.
We talked about this, didn't we?
I couldn't get into it. I struggled. But we're talking about Bard. We're talking about Bard. Chris Pine as the Bard in as the main character as a Bard in Dungeons and Dragons it's great. It's really good. Yeah, I struggled to get into Fallout. I need to give it another go.
Yeah,
I tried to do it on a plane.
Give it another go. It's pretty fire.
Give it another go.
Yeah, I think the Bard is just like such a funny character that somehow found its way into these like fantasy groups. And man, I feel like in Flesh and Blood we could just make that super fun to play. Bard should be a Storm deck. Like, tell me I'm wrong. Why is Bard not Storm? You're like stringing together these notes, and then you make a song by brain freezing your opponent and milling their entire deck. That's sweet.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to do that?
I like that. Smart. I'll tell you just quickly another class that could have a redesign or like a slight redesign is honestly Warrior.
Yeah. That's us.
Lackluster.
Though. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think it's fine. I just think it could be a little bit more interesting.
People love those attack reactions though. People love that shit.
Yeah, that's fine. But it's just it feels so one dimensional, right? And it feels like what Warrior has been based, even Kasai, right? Like the attack reactions are so important. And we've seen Warriors without them before and things like that. Yeah. Don't get me wrong.
Two-handed Warriors. You got this like combo-esque warrior in the form of Kasai.
Yeah, they're fine.
If we're talking about one-dimensional, I think Guardian is way more one-dimensional. Betsy, Victor, Bravo, even Starvo. Very similar gameplay loops.
Yeah, I think that's not so much the design of the heroes in the class. It's the decision to print some specific cards that they probably shouldn't have printed.
Yeah, I mean, they have
just
like
too universally playable.
The aura stuff that nobody does really, and
yeah,
I think Guardian is probably one of the more bland classes in Flesh and Blood. It is just, I think it is a fun class though because it's so rooted in Flesh and Blood fundamentals at times. Like it does a lot of blocking, it does a lot of attacking, and has these big swingy attacks, and it has these really efficient defense reactions. Like it is quintessentially Flesh and Blood or mid-range Flesh and Blood. So I mean that part of it's fun. What do you think about Ninja? Do you love Ninja? Like I like Katsu. I like Katsu.
Yeah, I think Katsu's really cool, and I think Fire was interesting enough in terms of its time and design. And I actually think Zen is pretty interesting actually. And I think using Zen as the conduit to power in the set is fine. I think it's really approachable. I think it's actually still has a reasonable amount of like playability to it in terms of the play and decision making. I think it's pretty cool and limited. I think if Ninja doesn't take another turn at some point, then I would probably say, oh, that's a little bit uninspired. But I think right now, I think they've done a really good job.
What hero do you think is the biggest flavor one in Flesh and Blood of all time?
Dash,
inventor extraordinary. You got the items, throwing them down.
Yeah, I think Dash is, honestly. That snapped my head immediately because I actually think Dash is one of the most. It's Dash or Viserai, honestly. I think those are the two most flavorful.
Chain's pretty cool though. The blood contract, like paying life. And like you're getting this like crazy power, by so much card advantage, and you're paying the price. Kind of.
Yeah. I actually think if I look at the first half of Heroes released and the second half of Heroes released in the lifespan, I'm talking adult heroes here, or limited, not Blitz specific heroes. I think the flavor and the design elements in the first half, just overall, if you add them all up, if you gave them all points, I think it's a higher total. Like it's a better group of design, and I think that's fine, right? Because it's harder to continue to innovate as you go through, and you want to re-innovate on things and kind of give them updates and things like that. But are we going to see ever something like? Do you remember when like Viserai came out as that?
Yeah, that was wild. It's like, oh my god! It's like not only is arcane damage a new thing, but we're hybrid arcane damage. Also, Viserai sucked. I'm remembering that.
It was so bad.
Yeah, it was actually so bad.
Chain though, all these things like when these heroes came out, even to an extent, if I look back to maybe the most interesting hero of recent times,
Icelander.
I don't know.
Icelander was. That was really interesting. I mean, they took the idea of putting a bunch of blues in your deck and made it really cool. And also, you're playing at instant speed.
Yeah,
you were definitely a wizard, and blues were decent cards in your deck. That was cool. We just came off the back of Part to Miss Fail,
bad.
so it's probably pretty fresh in your mind that like blues are fun and interesting cards to engage with. But I think for some time, Flesh and Blood, they were just kind of resource cards.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, no, you're right. I think Kasai would be the one I might shout out. As much as I don't actually love it, and I think it's not amazing, I do think it actually did a pretty good job of re-innovating on that kind of.
Let's talk about the woe. What's the worst of all time? What's the worst hero of all time from a design perspective?
Oh, from a design
I
perspective.
can snap this shit off so quick.
Is it Olympia? Is that what you're going to snap off?
It is absolutely Starvo. Starvo is the biggest.
No,
dude, that was so lazy and so bad and so antithetical to everything that Flesh and Blood stands for. It was actually win the game outside the game. It was win the game in deck building and then pure variance. Like, it was so garbage. Also, if Starvo's hero ability had said pick one of those fucking things, it would have been good. I think it would have been a good hero, but it gets all three. So some developer drastically misunderstood the consistency in which you could activate that hero ability.
Yeah. I mean, I will buy it from the flavor perspective and the design. It's a bit like lazy, sure.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of heroes that, I mean, I don't get Max in terms of like what he's meant to represent in the world of Wraith, and Olympia is also just feels like generic dude dot deck. Like,
generic dude dot deck, yeah. That's funny because like in regards to lore, I'm not super, I don't understand Max like in the world, but I feel like if you like so agnostic of the lore, we create a new mechanologist and it does a new different thing. And Max does the combo thing. It ascends the Nitro Mechanoid. That's a Max strategy. I love that. I think that's great. I think that's really cool. Yeah. That's really cool. But yeah.
What the fuck's Olympia doing?
No, I heard there's somebody I know locally who's like, yeah, I just bring my Olympia deck, and he's like an Olympia stan. I was like, why would you do that? Like, I did like what you just bring like this categorically worse deck that does the same thing that like Axis Dory does, but it's just bad. It's just so silly to me.
That's like being a stan for like the most average snack, being like, yeah, I'm a stan on popcorn. Like, it's just the best snack.
You know what? I love pizza. Everybody's like, I love pizza. And this dude's like, you know what I love? Gluten-free crust. And you're like, what the fuck? I'm celiac, by the way, so I have to eat that. But like, some dude's like, no, I prefer gluten-free crust. Nobody prefers that shit.
No. I mean, I've had some really good gluten-free pizza.
Yeah, because it's cauliflower crust. It's not the fucking soapy like shit. I'm sorry. I actually have to eat this stuff. So
I eat it a lot as well.
Yeah, there's some like
celiac, but
yeah, there's some artificial gluten-free bread. This is terrible. But yeah, that's the analogy. Is you're hanging around, everybody's like, wow, everybody's having this conversation where they talk about how much pizza they love, and somebody's like, gluten-free crust is better. And you're like,
I love gluten. There's a gluten-free bakery that I actually love though.
Okay,
and I prefer their lemon meringue pie to normal lemon meringue pie.
I think it's possible, but often when a gluten-free derivative is better, it's because it's not an artificial derivative. It's usually like a alternative, right? It's like something that tastes
rather than
a
replacement.
Yeah, the replacement stuff can be
or you've just had shit quality of that other thing.
Well, it exists for sure.
You've been eating it, yeah.
That's the case against the gluten-free bread guy. He's just wrong.
Yeah, that's the case against Olympia. I have a final question for you: is how much are people going to hate this episode, and is this going to be more of a polarizing episode because we don't talk about that much Flesh and Blood?
Oh, that's actually funny you say that. Yeah, I'll bring it up now. I mean, I have a Marvel Snap podcast that talks about Marvel Snap for maybe 10% of the time. By far the most loyal, devout audience. Like, it's fucking ridiculous. We post a single episode, there's 100 comments in like an hour, and there's only 2K views. People love this shit. Because I don't know why. Like, it's like a joke that we don't talk about Marvel Snap. So the whole entire comment section is, this is my favorite anything but Marvel Snap podcast. And yeah, I don't know. People,
that game still exists.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. I don't know how long. I don't think people hate it. I think they'll hate maybe some of the takes. Like, maybe there's a gluten-free bread guy listening. He's like, fuck these guys. Gluten-free bread is superior.
Yeah, well, let us know what you think. We like comments. Drop us some comments. I feel like we don't get enough love in the comments, you know? Let us
and to be clear, by the way, the reason we've recorded this kind of like, talk about U.S. Nationals. Obviously, U.S. Nationals would be tip of our tongue if we'd record next week, but I'm traveling, so we have to record a bit early. So we're like, all right, let's talk about U.S. Nats day one. Let's get some questions.
So it's Brennan's fault.
I did say I was like any topic, and then we got the cheeseburger shits.
Yeah. Hey, we're here for fan service. You know?
Yes. Oh,
cheeseburgers.
We are coming up on past 3 years.
We're past 3 years. Yep.
Coming up on 4 years.
while ago.
We still got to do top 10 waifus in Flesh and Blood.
Oh yeah.
Said fan service. So.
Well, I wanted to wait for a few more.
Okay.
Wait for a few more. There's a few in there now. There's 10 in there now. So you can
let us know if that's what you'd love to see next. We've been dying to do some Patreon content. Never. All right. If you listen to the podcast, you enjoy it. Number one thing you do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Again, if you want to get your question around next week's podcast, you just come in and cook out via the YouTube comments, and we will get it queued up. Twitter's our Fan_Dale, Brendan APG. Shout out to the Arsenal Pass patrons, and good luck to everybody that is looking forward to their nationals, especially you, Hayden. You gonna take that crown back?
I want to. I'm trying pretty hard. Really? Yeah, I'm testing a lot. Oh, well, a reason, man. I just don't know what to play. That's my challenge right now. I don't know what to play, but
it's tough. It's tough. Well, good luck. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.